You can hear the train whistle echoing through the forest even before it pulls into the Big Moose train station. But this is as far as the train travels, for now. Fewer than 100 miles lay between here and Lake Placid, where this iron road ends. Train advocates want to recondition the track so that a tourist train can carry visitors through the captivating land. A group called Rails to Trails has a far different way of letting people see this land. They would remove the rails, allowing hikers, cyclists, and snowmobilers to travel the path and view the sights of this special part of the Adirondacks.
I think that we could coexist with the recreational community. There's only one railroad through the Adirondacks. There's 10,000 miles of snowmobile trails in New York State. There's thousands of miles of recreational trails inside the park. I think it'd be just a terrible mistake and a bad decision to take out this 70 miles of track, which is the only railroad line to the high peaks.
Link said that the line must remain through to Lake Placid, a worldwide name that would help sell tickets. The owner of a restaurant at Big Moose train station said that the train travelers bring him good business.
As a train station, obviously I support the railroad, and personally for the business here, I think it's increased our lunches and our breakfasts. The average has been about 45 people throughout since May 25th, and it's been very beneficial.
What do you think it would do if the tracks were ripped up?
I do see that it would benefit snowmobiling in the winter. Being a snowmobiling is only about 12 weeks out of the year, snow dependent, I wouldn't really want to base my entire year on 12 weeks.
Regular train service stopped here when large-scale lumbering ended in the Adirondacks. That's when a lot of train service also ended to towns here. The train ride would offer mountain views, passing by lakes, ponds, and wildlife. Besides the tranquil marshes and bogs along the way, there are reminders of the 120-year-old history of the line. Train stations that were once busy, where fresh-cut logs were loaded onto rail cars, are now abandoned, and only wooden skeletons of their busy days remain.
This is truly one of the most remote areas and beautiful areas of the Adirondack Park, with these beautiful tamarack bogs, white birches, and miles of, if we were in Canada, we'd call it muskeg. It is the most fantastically beautiful piece of the Adirondacks.
No one disputes that observation. The question is, will it ever be open to the public? Will they see it from a seat on a train, or a bicycle, or a snowmobile? For Mountain Lake Journal, I'm Jack LeDuc along the Adirondack Railroad.
And with us now to talk more about the future of this train is Jack LeDuc from Mountain Lake Journal. We just saw Jack's piece. Nice to have you here. And also joining us, Bill Branson. You are the president of the Adirondack Scenic Railroad. Right. And also Dave Link, you are one of the board members on the board of directors. Nice to have you all here.
Nice to be here.
Well, Jack, why don't we pick up where you left off?
Well, that's where we left off, was how we're going to see, if we do see something along the track, going to see it from a seat in the train, a snowmobile, or a hiker going along the trails. What's it going to be?
Well, hopefully all three, Jack. The snowmobilers use the right-of-way now in the wintertime, and we don't intend to dispossess them from that. We run from May through to December. We'd like to run a little later in December, but we're trying to grow the other 3 seasons. There are a great deal of connecting trails that connect to the corridor. And with the construction of a few connectors between some of these trails, it would be really kind of an integrated trail system where our railroad could bring passengers in of all ages and persuasions to hike to remote lakes, ponds, visit some of the rural sensitive areas like Lake Lila, which is a new state purchased property in Hamilton County. Plus we can connect to Amtrak in Utica, New York, which is the national rail system. There's 10 trains a day back and forth from Penn Station in New York to Utica, and when our project is finished, it would be about a 3 hour and 45 to less than 4 hour trip from Utica to Lake Placid. So we could have people getting on in New York City around lunchtime on a Friday and getting off and coming into Lake Placid to the hotels and the resorts for the weekend and returning by rail on Sunday. So there's a lot of potential markets we are hoping to tap with the completion of the project. Last year we carried 76 70+ thousand passengers, a third year of an increase. We're on track to exceed that again this year with a nice increase in ridership and revenue. So we're excited. We're glad the state and we're having this discussion with the other stakeholders about the future of the railroad. It's kind of sat dormant for a number of years. We've been in business 22 years and carried 1.3 million passengers. And not everyone, but many, many passengers say to our conductors, when are we going to be able to ride to Lake Placid? So there's a lot of pent-up enthusiasm. I think it's going to be a positive effect to the economies of Tupper.
How important is Lake Placid?
It's very important. It's a small little place.
Very marketable.
It's a marketable name. And foreign tourists that come to the U.S. know about Lake Placid, Niagara Falls, the Grand Canyon, and a lot of those passengers are inclined to travel by rail. They've done it growing up in Europe or in Japan, for example, and they feel very comfortable seeing the scenery and experiencing our wilderness and wildlands by rail, and that's what we're really trying to market.
I think it's pretty clear that the position the state finds himself in now as a result of the '96 management plan that called for all of these things to happen. A lot of it hasn't happened, but I think it's pretty clear from their perspective that the status quo is not acceptable, that something has to change. The existing trail network lends itself to development. Wouldn't take an awful lot to make it a very, very interesting network, connecting with little connectors between Cranberry and Tupper, for example. But the notion of coming from the south, from most any city that can have an Amtrak connection, walking across the platform to our train, is very exciting. We've been working with one specific resort owner in Lake Placid on a very preliminary basis to try to decide what a package would look like, somebody coming from Boston or New York or wherever, and what would make that appealing. A lot of it, by the way, is appealing. But how would you price that? What amenities would you offer? Is it a weekend? Is it a week? Is it both? And it's very exciting, and I think the people who are looking out in the distance realize that not connecting the two ends really would be a mistake. Our proposal doesn't change anything with the snowmobilers. They have access to it the 1st of December as long as there's snow. And so we don't believe that what we want to accomplish does anything but enhance the experience, and it provides a way for people to see this wilderness. It's not a particularly hospitable place, and you can go for 20 or 30 or 40 miles without any amenities, well, over 40 miles with no amenities. But between Big Moose and Tupper, you've got one dirt crossroad.
Is that Forever Wild?
There's different land classifications, right, but a lot of it is wild forest or forever wild, or I can't remember the name of the more there's a commercial interest where they do logging, and but the public also has access to those easements. And there's a lot of large landholders, private owners who own parcels back in there, who are concerned about limiting trespassing and having to provide emergency services to people that might get hurt back in there. There's no cell phone. The weather changes dramatically in a very short period of time. In fact, it's raining here in Plattsburgh right now, but I have a feeling tonight going back on the railroad, we'll see snow going back down Old Forge tonight. Yeah. So
for the supporters of the idea of the multi-use recreation trail, your argument would be is that would not be an ideal trail for the entire 120-mile corridor.
It's naive to think that the elderly, the infirm, young families are ever going to go back there. It isn't really safe. There's no way, if you get in trouble, there's just no way out. And the crossroad at Sabotage, which is 26 or 8 miles from Big Moose, maybe?
It's another 12 miles out on that road to get to Route 30.
To a main road. So you're really quite isolated. And people think about hiking, and you pull your car up to a trailhead and you hike and you come back to your car and go home. It's not like that down here. You're surrounded by water, bogs, wetlands of some sort. There literally are stretches where you can't get off the corridor. So if you want to expose this terrific asset to a large number of people, not even a large number, but whatever the number is, this is the way to do it. These people are not going to go down there on four-wheelers or snowmobiles and experience this.
Well, part of it's also just the pleasure factor. Having been born and raised here, 6 months of the year can be kind of dark and muddy and unpleasant, and then there's the black fly season where Lord knows if you're out there with your family and you're in May and it's a weekend and your kids are being hauled away by the insects. I respect people who like to do what I would call more rustic and hardcore camping, but I enjoy sitting on a train and looking out the window and having a nice sandwich, and there's a lot of people I think who have passive interest in seeing the Adirondacks who also have a right to see it in that manner, and we can haul them through the wilderness. We won't impact it. We have holding tanks on our laboratories, and we're responsible from an environmental standpoint. But the economic upswing is a lot of these people will get off in Tupper Lake or Saranac Lake or Lake Placid, spend time and visit the venues and the private businesses, and we'll take them back out. And with them will go a positive experience that they've enjoyed, because it's a scenery and a part of the wilderness that you just do not see from the highways. It's different than Route 28 or Route 30 or even 87. It's true Adirondack wilderness. It's, as you'll see from Jack's footage, spectacular. And I'm excited about the people of the state being able to see it.
You know, Dave mentions Route 28, and one of the serendipitous aspects of this that's been in play the last 4 or 6 months is the Scout reservation at Sabatis. We've been contacted by the Longhouse Council in Syracuse. They have 16 or 18,000 Scouts that go in and out of that camp every summer, and they want to know when we can haul the kids from Utica. They want to put them on a train in Rochester or Buffalo. They are attracting other councils to this facility, and so they would like the parents to put the kids on the train in Rochester, Albany, Syracuse, bring them to Utica, have us bring them to the camp, get all the traffic off Route 28, have a life experience. I mean, what an experience for a young kid to go to Sabatis on a train.
Well, that's all well and good, but in the Broadway play and the movie Cabaret, Liza Minnelli sang a song entitled Money, 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 Money. Where does the money come from to get this? Is there any money available? It's been 2 decades?
Well, our previous expansions have been funded by federal mass transit monies administered by the State Department of Transportation. The DOT owns the railroad. We own the equipment that runs on it and provide the staff. So it's a state-owned asset. We're looking for possibly $16 to $18 million to complete the project, to bring speeds up to an average of 40 miles an hour, which would be about a 3-hour and 45-minute trip from Utica to Lake Placid. To remove the track, we're estimating, and an engineer has looked at it, it's going to cost possibly more to remove the rails and construct this long linear trail than it would be to preserve the rail asset. If the rail asset is removed, it's gone forever. We won't have the option of having a discussion about maybe a future need for freight service to a wood products plant in Tupper Lake or to the Lake Clear Industrial Park, or as automobiles continue to be frowned upon in more environmentally sensitive areas, we won't have the option to invest more in the rail structure.
You know,
this connects us to the national rail system, which is a very important asset. And
have you spoken to Albany seriously about something?
we've had some serious discussions.
Very high levels. We've been working at this since late winter, early spring, and have had a number of very successful meetings. You know, one of the things, 16 million, 18 million, whatever, the rails, or the railroad ties that are on the corridor now were put in, most of them in the 20s. And so an investment in railroad ties, if the ties themselves cost $10 million, their life expectancy is 50, 60 years.
So this is a one-time capital project.
Yeah.
It won't be a constant. The bridges have already been repaired. Most of the grade crossings have been rebuilt already. They just need the lights installed.
So this would be for the infrastructure. The 16
Strictly
to 8 is
infrastructure.
strictly to get it
Yes.
up and running to. That line hasn't been used for what, 30 plus years?
Well, we travel on it, but without passengers.
Right.
Correct.
But for the most part, hasn't been used for a long time. Beyond that, do you have the financial backing that you need to run an excursion train? If you're adding all these trains, if you're talking about adding sleeper cars and having these trains running constantly between Utica and Lake Placid, oftentimes tourist trains are kind of a hand-to-mouth operation. And would you have the financial stability and backing that you need to run the
trip-
train full time.
A couple things. The trip works best for us during the day. The sleeper arrangement, actually, the speeds are too slow, not slow enough rather, because if you leave and with the idea you're going to get there for breakfast, you've got to park it somewhere because you're going to be there during the night. It works better for everybody during the day. That's the first thing. As far as finances, this thing started on a shoestring and for a lot of years ran on a shoestring. But since '08, we have really worked very hard to deal with the financial needs, and we've eliminated all of our long-term debt. We've eliminated most of our short-term debt. We are current on all our vendors, and we've paid in advance for fuel for the balance of the year and for the commission on, for example, Polar. These are not insignificant amounts. So we've freed up an awful lot of our cash flow that used to service vendor bills and bank debt. And we instituted probably 3 years ago, we changed the bylaws so it causes us to limit the amount of debt we can have as a percentage of our revenue. So the railroad will, unless we really make serious mistakes, the railroad is going to remain healthy. We have paid all of these obligations down to a very, very low level that we've never seen before through ticket sales. It hasn't been through subsidies or grants or anything like that. We've done it by selling tickets. And so we find ourselves today with very little debt, a very short vendor list, and in a position where if we need to put on a little bit of debt for equipment, we can do it. And yes, we'll have to work at it. We'll have to change our structure a little bit, but we can do that.
As both of us are businessmen, and we run for-profit businesses, and it's hard to make a long-term capital commitment to your business if you don't know if you're going to be here in 5 or 10 years. So this is a very healthy process to have this discussion with the state about finishing the project, so we can make educated and prudent investments in long-term capital. We need some buildings we need to construct a new shop, upgrade our equipment, increase the amenities on board, and better our food service. But that will come when we know we're going to be able to provide and market those services.
And you're looking for a commitment from the state. Right now,
Sure.
you have a 30-day commitment at the most.
That's
We've
correct.
had it for 20 or 16 years.
But you would like a long-term commitment, a 20-year lease from the
Sure.
state.
That's correct.
If they open this plan and reevaluate this plan, I guess they're going to decide by January whether to do that. You would like them to say,
right.
we will give you 20 years on this rail corridor, and we will invest this money to upgrade the
And the
track.
thing about it is the state would like to do it too. And they have to figure out where they are. As Dave suggests, we're going to act prudently, we're going to go slow and think this through very carefully and get it right. But we're poised to do it, and all we need is a nod from somebody to say, yeah, we're with you.
How do you go about getting that nod?
Well, we're working with them
That's
intensely.
the process
and
of the review, and we hope the outcome is suitable for all of us.
For the folks who don't know what the review is, how would you briefly describe it?
Well, the management plan, which has governed the state-owned corridor since the 1990s, listed different options. One of them was completely remove the rails, give it back to the private landowners. One was have just the train. One was do nothing. And after a period of 5 years, the pros is they may review the plan. So this has now been about 15 years. So they're reviewing the plan. The plan, if it's reviewed, would call for a renewed commitment. We obviously can't run a long-term business with a 30-day permit. Our bank or any bank, no bank really wants to make a long-term commitment to any corporation, public, nonprofit, or for-profit, if they don't know if you're going to be around for more than 30 days and can pay back your obligation. So the outcome of this decision to review is hopefully going to make all the stakeholders happy, and we can move the project forward and have a really positive economic impact on the region.
The advocates for turning it into a recreation trail would say that they believe that by doing that they'll draw even more tourists.
Well,
I think that's overly
very
optimistic. I don't see a family getting out and walking 16 or 20 or 30 miles in inclement weather. Our population is aging. A lot of people want to do more passive things rather than rough outback camping. snowmobiling has been an issue because of decreased snowfall. I live on Tug Hill, where we're the snow capital east of the Mississippi, and been here all my life, and consistently, with a few exceptions, we've seen reduced snowfall and a shorter snowmobiling season every year. And there's numerous restaurants and taverns and hotels on Tug Hill and in the Black River Valley that are for sale or closed because of the lack of that business. So from an environmental sustainability aspect, I think we need to diversify our dependency on just snowmobiling in the wintertime for winter sport. We need to reopen Big Tupper, which is hopefully going to happen this winter on a volunteer basis. But there's been issues in the downhill snow skiing community about snowfall as well. On Tug Hill, Snow Ridge has had a shorter season. So whether we can argue about what's causing the shorter winters and less snow, we also need to think about the next generations and how to protect this economy. And this is an option that, well, we're reducing our carbon footprint, we're going to burn less fossil fuel, we're going to allow more people to come in here to experience this beautiful park from a different, in a unique way. This is one of the few places in the United States where you can come in from a metropolitan area on a trunk line railroad to Utica and come into this fantastic wilderness and experience it. And that's our big picture. That's what we'd like to see happen.
You know, the notion of picking the tracks up and just abandoning that whole form of movement is misguided to the extent that it eliminates so many options. And you were in the corridor, Jack, you saw it. There are places young families will never go. It's just too remote. There are no options. You'll go 27 miles before you get to another road. The elderly, the disabled, I mean, those people will never ever get back there if that track is pulled up. And I believe for sure that if the track disappears, that will be the last good thing that ever happened from that corridor. That will eliminate all the possibilities. The option list is so much diminished with that event.
There's another thing to talk about here, though, and that's the past. And Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, Old Forge and Tupper Lake exist because the railroad was there before them, and those towns sprang up to service the railroad, the wood industry, the great hotels, the sanitariums, the big camps. And they're there because the railroad was there in 1893, which led to this growth. The 1950s came along, we built the interstate highway system. Trains disappeared for 30, 40 years. Well, the national and internationally, the rail industry is on a tremendous rebound. But it's also historic. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's the longest National Register property in the United States, the entire length of the railroad. It's on the State Register of Historic Places. And if we rip it up, whether it's legal to do so or not is another argument, it's gone. And it will be gone forever because it'll never be put back down again. It would be just too prohibitive cost-wise and from a regulatory standpoint to put it back down.
You say if it's legal.
Well, it might
These
not
are
be.
historic properties, and
There's a whole
going to be a legal
discussion.
battle that.
Plus, the properties were originally purchased by the railroad from private property owners, and in some cases, we haven't confirmed this yet, but there were what they called reversionary rights clauses, where if the track was removed, the property would revert back to the original private landowner. So, and this has happened in other parts of this state. Other railroads that have been abandoned, the property went back to the adjoining landowner who owns the property
The
today.
fireworks won't stop, in other words.
Is it possible that this could get tied up in
This could
lawsuits,
be
so
in
that this could drag
litigation for a
out
decade.
or more?
Yes.
Sure.
And also with the removing of the tracks, a number of projects that we've seen elsewhere in the country, that sometimes can drag on for a number of
That's
years.
correct.
So you wouldn't necessarily see this recreation trail probably at least for a decade or more.
No, and we need to address the expense
Right.
because there's a tremendous expense to remove the trail. Some engineers have estimated over $16 million or more than it would cost to fix the track because, for example, the ties need to be disposed at a hazardous landfill. They're considered a hazardous waste. And we just did a 6-mile improvement down near Old Forge. It was about $10,000 per mile to just dispose of the used ties, not to mention the other construction. So it's not just to snap your finger.
I think the number was $21,000 a mile for the ties. to
Yeah,
get
that's
rid of them.
correct.
Yeah.
So why do you think North Elba and a handful of other communities have endorsed the idea of the recreation trail over having the railroad bring tourists to the dry lakes.
I think that in the past, the business people in particularly Lake Placid have viewed us sort of as competition because we take people out of town. And if they spend a half a day in Saranac Lake, that's a half a day less they're spending in Lake Placid. I think what they're not embracing is the notion that the railroad will bring new people into town who have never been there before, and the market for it from the population centers that would now have access to it, the population centers are huge. And so the inflow of new people to town is the piece that is not getting talked about. It's a fabulous opportunity, and I think that's one reason one of our resort operators is so keen on learning and helping think about this.
There's also, I think, some just plain impatience on the part of the public who've waited 15, 18 years for the track to be finished. Pataki appropriated money and it was put on hold. The community of Tupper Lake raised $400,000 to build a beautiful replica train station on the original site. And they've been waiting patiently for a decade, since 2004, for a track to be fixed so a train could pull in. And
there's the station.
And people drive by there every day, and where's the train?
Yeah.
So it's an understandable concern.
Is that frustration what has made this such a bitter debate? This
I
is
think
really
part of it.
so.
I think it's contributory, yes.
And you know, some of the population, there needs to be a distinction, and you guys already know it, but we don't own the corridor. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that and are blaming us for the lack of attention that it's received. The fact is that had the unit management plan been acted on beginning in '96, we wouldn't even be talking about this. This would have already been accomplished.
We'd be having lunch on the train and enjoying a beautiful scenic afternoon.
That said, though, at a time when the economy is still tough, a lot of people probably wondered, will the state pony up $16 to $18 million to refurbish
let's
the
talk
the
about
tracks?
that. The consultancy in Philadelphia that did one of the studies estimated the new jobs that would be created as a result of this improvement would be 563 the first year, and almost a $40 million economic impact in the region the first year. Now, part of that is the construction effort, but the part that isn't remains, and from there on the increase in tourism would be, even the first year, maybe 250 or 60 jobs. And every year thereafter, presumably, if the train is successful in helping build and reinvigorate, that tourist impact would increase. So the state will recover its investment. You know, as I said before, the lifespan of this rail bed is, you know, decades. And so when you think about it as a 50-year, 40-year, whatever, 60, it's not much every year. Sales taxes, occupancy taxes, income taxes, all of those things would be enhanced as a result of all of this job creation. The folks in Tupper who are trying to get the resort done are very keen on this. They recognize the value it would have not just to them but to the town. And the Tupper people, as David said, the Tupper people have been hearing about this for a long time, and they're understandably frustrated.
And they've had a loss of industry there, and they're
want some
looking
action.
desperately for a full employment base.
Has there been any interest, though, for using it as a freight line? Has there been any industry saying, we want this corridor open?
The state has talked a little bit about that, but that's really not what we do. And if we were asked to contemplate freight, we would do it. But that will come from the state, and I think the state would have to engage in a noticeable incentive program, something to get people to come back to places like Tupper Lake. That doesn't mean to say it couldn't happen. It would be pretty simple. But that's a conversation that has to start with the state.
We have carried freight on the part-time, on the south end of our line. We have carried some freight. But it's the wood industry is a very cyclical industry, and just because there haven't been sawmills or plywood mills operating in the last 15 or 20 years, the trees are still growing. We've been in a building slump nationwide for a long period of time, and if building improves, that resource is most efficiently transported to market by rail, where it's the cheapest way, the lowest impact way to move goods to market. So if it's there, it will be used. If the track's there, you could be servicing a freight customer within 10 days if they needed service.
And we do get inquiries.
Now, there's been a lot of talk here about the technical part of it, the rails, the ties. This place is in the wilderness. I haven't heard any word about a marketing plan to sell this project. Is there
You
such
mean
a
to
thing?
sell the actual reconstruction?
Both the reconstruction and the train itself.
Well, we've built
After you get a line, if you get a line.
We spent 6 or 8 months building an extremely well thought out, actually bulletproof business plan, which we finished up probably March or April. And we have been working with mostly state officials at varying levels, but from mid-level to the highest levels, to review the business plan and its implications. And it is a terrific document. Having said that, we are thinking and contemplating what the marketing would look like if the state says, you know, this makes sense, we're going to do this. And it would mean a little bit of change in our organization, but it's easily handled. And it would be very exciting. The state would partner, I'm sure, as well as some of the resort and
I
venues.
love New York.
Sure, absolutely.
We have done some work with them in the past, but we really couldn't market the big picture because we don't have the product to sell. And it's a lot different to sell a little 10-mile trip down to ride the carousel in Saranac Lake than it is to market to New York City or to a more metropolitan.
But in that $16 to $18 million you need to reconstruct it, anything for marketing in there?
No, that's strictly construction.
Shouldn't that, or
Well, it's
should
in our
it, should
plan.
it, or should it not be?
We can sustain
It's
our
in our
marketing
plan.
efforts.
And what do you say to the folks that say you should release that plan to let the public know what your business plan looks like?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the answer goes something like this. We have found sort of an economy approach to the facts as they're displayed to the public. So we've been reluctant to offer up a lot of detail, having found that it's actually translated into a different presentation by the time it's out there. So we've been slow. Our perspective and our decision at the executive level and at the board level has been that the business plan belongs with the people who are making decisions. And we will work with them as intensely as they choose, and it has been intense since spring. And it's grown increasingly intense that we work with people who are the actual decision makers. The noise in the background is in some cases unfortunate, in some cases it's helpful. But there will be a point where we get more public with it. But for the time being, I'm pretty happy with what we've done. The decisions we've made have gotten us a long way through the process. And we're not designed, we're a little railroad, we're not designed to engage in a public scrap. The organization that would see the tracks gone was designed specifically to fight, and it's being funded for a fight. That's not something we're built to do. So we have made the decision to remain objective, deal with fact, and work with people who are in the decision process, and give less opportunity for our opponents to interpret what they think.
Jack mentioned that 2 boards passed resolutions supporting review or even more aggressively removing of the rails. But in our plan, and we have public documents from numerous town boards, economic development committees, state and regional elected officials, banks, business partners, community members supporting our railroad. We have hundreds of these letters.
Yeah.
And we have some support also, and people are standing up and letting it be known publicly that we have a good project and a product that might be a very sustainable product and a benefit to the community.
There's a remarkable amount of support from very significant people involved in the community and the region. And we have not trumpeted that out there too much. But for example, there's one organization that actually represents 42 different entities, and those are IDAs, EDAs, banks, colleges, counties, and that particular document alone is 42 different agencies, and I think the number is somewhere around 130 visitors bureaus, things like that, chambers of commerce. We've got a lot of support. The opposition has been very vocal, and they've been able to fund that. But if you boil that down and look at where the noise is coming from, it's about the same 8 or 10 people all the time.
You mentioned the opponents being vocal. Even the train advocates. It seems for many people this comes down to an either-or argument.
Shouldn't be.
And I think the question that a lot of people have, and perhaps they're not knowledgeable enough, is why couldn't both a rec trail and the train tracks coexist along much of that corridor, if not the entire
There's
line?
no reason it couldn't.
They can. The UMP from 1996 calls for that very thing to happen. And the network of trails that that are woven around the corridor now is extensive, thousands of miles. It would not take much to connect a few of them, which really underlies the problem of this debate. It really isn't about trails. If it was about trails, the opposition would be coming to our meetings, they'd be coming to our panels like this one, and they would be working with us to resolve the problems. The UMP called for that very thing to happen, and that's what we've said since the beginning, and it wouldn't be particularly grievous. Adding 68 miles to the trail network now by ripping up the tracks doesn't really change much. There are thousands of miles already. So we believe that if it was really about a trail system, they would be working with us. I think the real hope is that it disappears. And there are publications going back 5 or 10 or 15 years, and the theme is the same. Ultimately, no mechanized travel, no motorized travel on the corridor. And those are the people who are the leadership in ARDA. And so, you know, we don't actually think that's the real story. We believe that they would like to see all of it disappear. And I think some of the snowmobile people are worried about it too, that this is a risk for everybody. And if it resolves that no mechanized travel is allowed on the corridor, that eliminates an awful lot of people. And really what it means is the corridor won't get used because south of Tupper, it's very remote, it's dangerously remote. People aren't going to see it. And so that resource as a public resource probably would disappear.
But the railroad last month when Jack was out photographing turned 120 years old last month. And 90 of the last 120 years, it's successfully carried passengers in and out of this region safely. It's carried freight in and out of this region safely. And yes, it's been morbid for a couple decades, and I can understand the angst in the Tupper Lake area or anywhere in the region that this project has not been finished and brought up as a real contributor to the economy. But that doesn't mean we should remove it. It's a true asset that needs to be exploited, a pleasant way to travel, a great way to affect our economy, a responsible way to, from an environmental aspect to affect the economy. And I think it would be just a crime to remove an historic, potentially very valuable transportation asset when we have other assets that complement that.
Would taking state officials on that trip help?
We've had state officials out there. We've had photographers like you from newspapers and magazines, and every time I personally go out there with and I've been involved in the railroad up here since 1978. I've rarely ever had anyone leave saying that this isn't a great idea and we should preserve this asset and we should give this more serious consideration.
Have these been pitched to the regional economic development councils?
We have
both
supportive letters from Mohawk Valley and the North Country.
The North Country.
Yeah.
Have they talked about actually coming through with any of the funding? If the state doesn't come up with the 16 to 18 million, is there any chance that the regional economic development councils may decide that these projects are worthwhile? This phase right now is nearly completed for the third year, but they are supporting tourist projects, and there are 3 hotels in the region. In the past, they have supported the short line leading into the former paper mill in Newton Falls. So down the road, do you see them
we'll
as
go
a
back to
potential
them.
source?
I think we get through this review process and see where that takes us. And and I agree, I think that they'll have some indication before the year's end. And depending on how that comes out, we'll go back to them. But they're supportive now, and they're part of the document. So we believe that in some way they would be helpful to us.
So if the money doesn't come directly from the state, it may come roundabout from the state through
And there are federal
these
programs
economic
that
development councils.
could be
I
helpful.
mean, in the
Federal
case
money
of,
available.
Periodically, yes.
in the case of we're looking at a magnitude expansion, the number of hotel rooms in the region with these 2 or 3 projects. And if we're going to have those hotel rooms, for them to profit and to prosper, they need to be full of tourists and visitors. And a natural way to bring a new type of visitor in to fill those hotels is from the large metropolitan markets in a unique way that's unique and particular only to this region, which would be to bring them in here by rail as they have done for 90 of the last 120 years. It
would obviously be a beautiful ride. Some may question, though, would they go to Utica to pick up a train to bring it to, say, Saranac Lake if they knew Hotel Saranac is refurbished and turns into a destination
That's
spot?
where the marketing comes in.
Yeah. And we do have friends with Amtrak who are interested in helping with this project.
Yep.
So we believe
I
that
would
this
think
is,
they would be.
yeah, they are, and we think that this is quite marketable. Again, we'll see how the state comes out, with their thinking. But there's an irony in this. The trip as it is now is very pleasant, and going to Big Moose is delightful, so on. But the irony is, the best part is the part that needs to be repaired. And that is where the most beauty is, the most ecologically interesting places are. That's where you bring college kids. That's where you bring groups that want to study the flora, the fauna. That's where you really can bring color to a black and white picture. What we supply now is a nice trip. It's an adventure. And a lot of people who live in an urban environment really think it's the wilderness. The wilderness begins above Big Moose. And that stretch is the part, particularly from Tupper to Saranac, that would be the easiest to do and the least expensive because the trail network is so extensive there. This is a layup. Pulling the tracks up eliminates enormous numbers of options. Developing it opens up so many possibilities for so many people who will never otherwise experience this.
We need to ask you, we've obviously been reporting for the past month about the vandalism to the locomotive. You gentlemen would probably classify it more as sabotage. You don't believe that was just
Absolutely.
Well,
somebody...
it was done in a manner to make it not visible. So, I mean, a vandalism is, you might break a window or spray paint and run away, but someone was very careful to do this in a manner where when the crew came to work in the morning to do their inspections, which are a federally mandated inspection we do every morning to the locomotive, we didn't notice this. So the machine didn't operate properly. So we gave everyone a cheery refund and tried to figure out what was going on. And it took 3 men. We had some experts come from quite a distance to try to do the actual diagnosis. And wires have been cut in a way where and then put back into the locomotive where we really couldn't see how it was done. So it was an intentional act to disable the train, and we've had issues like this in the past. We had it happen about 4 or 5 years ago. We've had fires built on the track. We've had grade crossing signals vandalized, wires cut, which is a very serious matter because if the signals didn't work when the train approached, we could have a motor vehicle accident. And
so you've had this happen before, and it's been several years back, so is your...
It's been over a period of years.
Is your
multiple.
thought that it may not be necessarily tied to the debate that's going on right now?
Well, that's hard to say. The players in the debate really haven't changed. And the squeaky wheel is still out there, and who knows who these perpetrators are, but it's very similar. We had a locomotive that was vandalized 4 years ago.
This was almost the same manner.
Just exactly carbon copy. Our crews are different than they were then. And so as Dave said, whoever got in there and did it knew what they were doing and what they were trying to accomplish.
We have a reward posted.
Yeah, $10,000 reward.
The Lake Placid Police are working on it. The Federal Railroad Administration has been to our property and looked at the damage. And also, the National Transportation Safety Board has an interest because we are a common carrier railroad in the eyes of the NTSB. So it's a very serious federal matter.
Criminal act, then.
This is a criminal act.
Absolutely.
Have the police or the federal investigators shared with you whether they have leads or have an idea who may have done this or why?
We've talked to them about every 10 days. There is not a lot new yet, but they've suggested that these things sort of develop over time, and as holidays come closer, $10,000 might appear to be more attractive. I don't think anybody's surprised that we don't have an answer at the moment.
We have beefed up our security arrangements. We had cameras installed in the past and some other security procedures, but obviously we're reviewing them and we're going to make improvements to them.
And it came at the worst time of possible, at the height of the
during the foliage season,
foliage
which is
season.
Our peak.
And also with the Halloween excursion between Lake Placid and Saranac Lake, which is a big run for you folks.
I guess you had about 400 show up for that?
Well, we were very fortunate. We found the problem after 4 days of testing, and it was really relatively a quick fix. And we quick enough where we could notify the public and through the media that we were indeed going to run. And we got quite an outpouring. We sold out crowds, and we had some very happy families and kids, and We also got a lot of verbal and emotional support from our community that thanked us for being there as a train and being part of their community for so many years.
A lot of organizations reached out to us to offer help, and Bombardier right here called the day after and said any way they can be helpful, they'd like to.
So that was good that you could get it repaired in time to have that that Halloween run, which, Jack, you were there and you took a few pictures.
It was
hundreds
packed.
and hundreds of people.
Hundreds of kids.
Yeah.
And as many grandparents too, I think, who probably had as good a time as the children.
So that would have been a blow to you if you had lost that weekend as well.
Our plan, if we couldn't get running, was to refund everybody's money, but we would still hold the party in Saranac at the station, and we would open the carousel for the rides so as not to disappoint the kids. So we would have done that anyway, but we would have refunded their money. Gladly, we didn't have to, but we would have done that, and it had a good ending.
And you mentioned you've taken steps now to beef up security.
Sure.
That's correct.
And the police, I think, are a little bit more aware of our vulnerability as well.
Bill Branson, David Link, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Jack, thank you as well.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thanks.